If you want to understand why one beverage consumed by millions every single morning might be doing more to protect your cardiovascular system than any pharmaceutical intervention, don't look at expensive heart medications. Don't look at surgical procedures. Look at what's sitting in your kitchen cupboard right now and what happens when you drink it the right way at the right time. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and cardiovascular researcher. And before we go any further, here's a number that should stop you cold. By the time most people experience their first cardiac event, arterial plaque has been silently accumulating for an average of 20 to 30 years. That means the damage happening inside your blood vessels right now started decades ago, and every single morning you miss the opportunity to activate your body's natural plaque clearing mechanisms. You're allowing that damage to compound. Most people have been told that once arterial plaque forms, it's permanent. You manage it with statins, hope it doesn't rupture, and accept it as the inevitable price of aging. Your doctor probably told you to eat less saturated fat, exercise more, maybe take a baby aspirin, and wait for your next stress test. But after nearly 15 years practicing emergency medicine and studying cardiovascular disease, I've observed something that completely contradicts that fatalistic narrative. Your arteries are not static pipes that slowly clog until they're blocked. They are living dynamic tissues with an extraordinary capacity for repair and regeneration when given the right signals. And there is one specific morning drink, consumed correctly with precise timing, that sends a cascade of repair signals so powerful that researchers have measured actual reductions in arterial plaque thickness in as little as 12 weeks. Think of your arterial walls like the inside of a water pipe, not a rigid metal pipe, but a living biological surface covered in a single layer of cells called the endothelium. This endothelial layer is supposed to be smooth, flexible, and impermeable, creating a frictionless surface that allows blood to flow effortlessly. But when that endothelial layer gets damaged, everything changes. Imagine that smooth pipe developing tiny cracks and rough patches. Your body sees these damaged areas as emergency repair sites and sends cholesterol particles to patch the damage temporarily, like spackling compound filling cracks in drywall. But if the underlying damage keeps happening, those temporary patches become permanent plaques that grow larger and more unstable over time. Here's what almost nobody discusses. That endothelial damage doesn't happen randomly. It happens because of three specific biological breakdowns that conventional cardiology often overlooks. First, declining nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is the master signaling molecule that tells your arterial walls to stay relaxed and flexible. After age 40, your natural nitric oxide production drops by approximately 50%. Second, chronic low-grade inflammation driven by inflammatory compounds in processed foods, environmental toxins, and metabolic dysfunction. This inflammation keeps telling your immune system that your arterial walls are under attack, perpetuating the repair and plaque cycle. Third, impaired endothelial progenitor cell function. These are specialized stem cells that are supposed to patrol your bloodstream, identify damaged sections of arterial lining, and patch them with fresh, healthy endothelial cells before plaque ever forms. Now here's where conventional cardiology gets it backwards. Instead of addressing these three root causes, most interventions focus downstream on managing cholesterol levels or preventing clot formation. It's like mopping the floor while the pipe is still leaking. And the one morning drink I'm about to show you addresses all three of these upstream mechanisms simultaneously. And the one beverage at the center of this cardiovascular protection, the one drink that activates these repair pathways more powerfully than almost any food or supplement, most people are drinking it wrong. They're adding things that completely block its beneficial effects. They're consuming it at the wrong time when their body can't utilize its active compounds. And they have no idea that with three simple modifications, this same drink they're already consuming could be clearing arterial plaque while they go about their morning. That drink is coffee, but not the coffee most people are drinking. Not coffee loaded with sugar and flavored creamers that spike insulin and shut down fat burning. Not coffee consumed randomly throughout the day when cortisol is already elevated. I'm talking about black coffee, consumed within 45 minutes of waking, with one specific addition that amplifies its cardiovascular effects by nearly 400%. Before I explain the science, I want to address the obvious skepticism, because I would share it. For years, coffee was demonized by the medical establishment. We were told it raised blood pressure, increased heart attack risk, and should be limited or avoided entirely. But what the research from the last decade has uncovered completely flips that assumption on its head. When you look at large-scale population studies tracking hundreds of thousands of people over decades, a clear pattern emerges. People who drink 3 to 5 cups of coffee daily have significantly lower rates of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and all-cause mortality compared to non-coffee drinkers. Researchers at Harvard Medical School analyzing data from the Nurses' Health Study tracked over 83,000 women for 24 years and found that women who consumed 2 to 3 cups of coffee daily showed a 25% reduction in coronary heart disease compared to non-drinkers. A separate meta-analysis published in Circulation reviewed data from over 1 million participants across multiple countries and confirmed that moderate coffee consumption is associated with an 11% reduction in heart failure risk. But here's what makes this fascinating from a mechanistic standpoint. Coffee isn't just correlated with better cardiovascular outcomes. We now understand the precise molecular pathways through which specific compounds in coffee actively reverse arterial damage. Mechanism 1: chlorogenic acid and endothelial repair. Coffee contains a polyphenol compound called chlorogenic acid, which survives the roasting process and remains highly bioavailable when you drink it. When chlorogenic acid enters your bloodstream, it does something remarkable at the level of your vascular endothelium. It activates a genetic switch called NRF2, which is essentially the master regulator of your body's antioxidant defense system. Think of NRF2 like the emergency broadcast system in a city under attack. When it gets activated, it sends urgent signals to hundreds of genes simultaneously, telling them to start producing protective antioxidant enzymes, including superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase. Why does this matter for your arteries specifically? Because oxidized LDL cholesterol, the type that actually burrows into arterial walls and forms plaque, can only do its damage when there aren't enough antioxidants present to neutralize it. Chlorogenic acid activation of NRF2 essentially floods your arterial walls with the protective compounds that prevent LDL oxidation in the first place. It's like installing a sophisticated air filtration system that captures pollution particles before they can coat your walls. Researchers at the University of Oslo recruited 64 adults with documented endothelial dysfunction, measured using flow-mediated dilation, the gold standard test for arterial health. Half consumed 500 milliliters of coffee daily for 8 weeks, while the control group abstained. The coffee group showed a 32% improvement in flow-mediated dilation, indicating measurably better endothelial function. Even more striking, their levels of oxidized LDL dropped by 18%, while inflammatory markers including CRP and interleukin-6 decreased significantly. Mechanism 2: caffeine and nitric oxide restoration. Now, we need to talk about caffeine specifically, because this is where timing becomes absolutely critical. Caffeine is a methylxanthine compound that blocks adenosine receptors in your vascular smooth muscle. Adenosine normally promotes vasodilation, so you might think blocking it would constrict blood vessels and raise blood pressure. And acutely, for the first 30 minutes after consumption, that's exactly what happens. But here's the paradox that confused researchers for decades. Despite this acute effect, chronic coffee consumption is associated with lower blood pressure and better vascular function over time. The explanation lies in a secondary pathway. When caffeine blocks adenosine receptors, it triggers a compensatory upregulation of nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme responsible for producing nitric oxide in your endothelial cells. Think of it like this. Your body normally relies on adenosine to keep blood vessels relaxed. When caffeine blocks that pathway temporarily, your vascular system panics and says, "We need another way to maintain blood flow." So it cranks up nitric oxide production as a backup system. But here's the beautiful part. That upregulated nitric oxide production doesn't just compensate for the blocked adenosine, it exceeds baseline levels, creating a net increase in nitric oxide availability. A study from the University of São Paulo measured nitric oxide metabolites in the blood of habitual coffee drinkers versus non-drinkers and found that regular consumers had 41% higher levels of circulating nitric oxide even 12 hours after their last cup. This sustained elevation in nitric oxide keeps arterial walls flexible, reduces platelet aggregation that could form dangerous clots, and most importantly, signals endothelial progenitor cells to mobilize from bone marrow and travel to sites of arterial damage. Mechanism 3. Trigonelline and arterial inflammation suppression. Coffee contains another compound that most people have never heard of called trigonelline. This is a plant alkaloid that converts during roasting into niacin, but even in its unconverted form, trigonelline has profound anti-inflammatory effects, specifically in vascular tissue. It works by inhibiting an inflammatory signaling pathway called NF-kappa B, which you can think of as the master alarm system that keeps your immune system on high alert. When NF-kappa B is chronically activated, your immune cells keep attacking your arterial walls as if they're foreign invaders, perpetuating inflammation that drives plaque formation. Trigonelline essentially turns down the volume on this alarm system, allowing your arteries to shift from a state of perpetual inflammation to a state of repair and regeneration. It's like the difference between a fire station that's constantly responding to false alarms versus one that only mobilizes for real emergencies. When the false alarms stop, the system can finally focus on preventive maintenance. Research from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden examined arterial tissue samples from patients undergoing bypass surgery and measured inflammatory marker expression in areas of plaque formation. They found that markers of NF-kappa B activation were 7 times higher in diseased arterial sections compared to healthy sections. In a subsequent intervention study, participants who consumed 4 cups of coffee daily for 16 weeks showed a 23% reduction in circulating markers of NF-kappa B activation, suggesting systemic anti-inflammatory effects. Now here's where the one specific addition I mentioned transforms ordinary coffee into a cardiovascular repair accelerator. That addition is Ceylon cinnamon, not cassia cinnamon, which is what you find in most grocery stores and contains high levels of coumarin that can damage your liver in large doses. I'm talking about true Ceylon cinnamon, which contains powerful compounds called cinnamaldehyde and procyanidin polymers that work synergistically with coffee's active ingredients. When you add 1/4 teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon to your morning coffee, 3 additional mechanisms activate. First, cinnamon improves insulin sensitivity, which matters enormously for arterial health because chronically elevated insulin is one of the primary drivers of endothelial damage. Think of insulin like a switch that determines whether your body is in storage mode or repair mode. When insulin is elevated, your endothelial progenitor cells stay dormant in your bone marrow instead of circulating to repair arterial damage. Cinnamon's effect on insulin sensitivity keeps that repair crew mobilized. Second, cinnamon contains type A procyanidins that directly inhibit platelet aggregation, reducing the risk that existing plaques will trigger dangerous clot formation. A study from Penn State University demonstrated that participants who consumed 1 gram of cinnamon daily showed a 13% reduction in platelet aggregation measured through laboratory assays, comparable to the effect of low-dose aspirin, but without bleeding risk. Third, cinnamon amplifies the NRF2 activation triggered by coffee's chlorogenic acid, creating a synergistic effect where the combination produces greater antioxidant activity than either compound alone. Researchers at the USDA measured the combined antioxidant capacity of coffee plus cinnamon and found it was 387% higher than coffee alone, not simply additive, but genuinely multiplicative. Here is the exact 7-day protocol based on what the research tells us works. Every single morning, within 45 minutes of waking, before you eat anything, prepare 8 ounces of black coffee using filtered water and organic beans if possible. Add 1/4 teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon powder, not cassia, and stir thoroughly until dissolved. Drink it slowly over 15 to 20 minutes, not gulped down in 5 minutes. Do not add sugar, honey, flavored creamers, or milk. These additions spike insulin and completely block the metabolic pathways we're trying to activate. The timing matters enormously. Your cortisol awakening response peaks approximately 30 to 40 minutes after waking, creating a natural window where your body is primed for stem cell mobilization and repair signaling. The coffee and cinnamon combination hijacks this window, amplifying the beneficial cortisol spike while suppressing the inflammatory aspects. If you wait until mid-morning when cortisol has already declined, you miss this critical activation period. From 15 years of clinical practice, here are the 4 details that make the difference between partial results and transformative ones. First, drink it black. I cannot emphasize this enough. When you add sweeteners or dairy, you trigger an insulin response that immediately shifts your metabolism from repair mode to storage mode. The entire mechanism we discussed gets blocked at the hormonal level. If you absolutely cannot tolerate black coffee, add 1 teaspoon of MCT oil or grass-fed butter, which provides fat without spiking insulin, but nothing else. Second, source matters for the cinnamon. Most cinnamon sold in supermarkets is cassia cinnamon from China or Indonesia, which contains high levels of coumarin, a compound that can cause liver damage with regular consumption. Ceylon cinnamon from Sri Lanka contains negligible coumarin and higher concentrations of the beneficial cinnamaldehyde and procyanidins. The cost difference is minimal, usually $2 to $3 more per container, but the safety and efficacy difference is substantial. Third, don't exceed 5 cups of coffee daily. More is not better. The studies showing cardiovascular benefit used 3 to 5 cups, and going beyond that range introduces risks including elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, and increased anxiety that can negate the positive effects. If you're currently drinking 6 or 7 cups daily, scale back gradually to avoid withdrawal headaches. Fourth, timing of your first meal matters. Wait at least 60 minutes after finishing your coffee before eating. This fasting window allows the coffee and cinnamon compounds to fully activate metabolic pathways without interference from incoming nutrients that would shift your body's priorities toward digestion rather than repair. The 3 mistakes that completely cancel the cardiovascular benefits. Mistake 1 is adding sugar or artificial sweeteners. Even 0-calorie sweeteners trigger insulin release through cephalic phase response, where just the sweet taste on your tongue signals your pancreas to release insulin in anticipation of incoming sugar. This shuts down the repair pathways we're activating. Mistake 2 is drinking coffee with a high-carbohydrate breakfast. If you drink your coffee alongside toast, pastries, cereal, or fruit juice, the resulting glucose and insulin spike overwhelms the beneficial effects. Your body prioritizes dealing with the blood sugar load over activating repair mechanisms. Mistake 3 is inconsistent timing. Your circadian biology relies on consistent signals. If you drink your coffee at 7 a.m. Monday, 9:30 a.m. Tuesday, and 11 a.m. Wednesday, you're confusing your hormonal patterns and preventing the adaptive upregulation of beneficial pathways. Pick a consistent wake time and stick to it. Let's lock in everything we covered. Your arteries are living tissues with extraordinary repair capacity when given the right signals. Arterial plaque forms because of 3 upstream failures: declining nitric oxide, chronic inflammation, and impaired endothelial progenitor cell function. Coffee contains chlorogenic acid that activates antioxidant defenses, caffeine that upregulates nitric oxide production, and trigonelline that suppresses inflammatory pathways. Adding Ceylon cinnamon creates synergistic effects, improving insulin sensitivity, inhibiting platelet aggregation, and amplifying antioxidant activity. The protocol is simple: 8 ounces of black coffee with 1/4 teaspoon Ceylon cinnamon within 45 minutes of waking, 60 minutes before eating. Source Ceylon cinnamon specifically. Never exceed 5 cups daily and maintain consistent timing. Your cardiovascular health is not a passive decline into disease that you're obligated to accept. The endothelial cells lining your arteries right now possess the genetic programming to repair damage, clear plaque, and restore function. The question is simply whether you're sending the signals that activate those programs or blocking them with poor timing and interfering compounds. These repair systems exist in you right now. They're built into your biology. They're waiting for the activation signal. And you can send that signal starting tomorrow morning with a cup of coffee and a quarter teaspoon of cinnamon that together cost less than 50 cents. I see messages from people who've watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you double check right now? Subscribing is free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people like you who want real science-based cardiovascular information instead of pharmaceutical marketing. If this information was useful to you, please share this video with someone you care about who's been told their arterial plaque is irreversible or who's struggling with cardiovascular risk factors. Check out my previous video where I break down the 5 foods that are silently destroying your endothelial function and exactly what to replace them with. Dr. Liana out.